You're in Ecuador, huh?
Yeah.
This is like a nice place.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome back to panel 3. And the topic is purpose-driven organizations and DAOs. And if you think you know what that means, think again. Because we have 3 people with very strong opinions about these things. And I, for sure, will be learning quite a bit. Can I ask each of you to introduce yourselves? We'll start with you, Nikoline, and give us, if you would, in addition to the introduction, a podcast or a book that you're connected with recently.
Oh yeah, that's cool. The books. Let's see. I have actually 2, if I can be so blunt to decide to. There is one that's called The Gift by Lewis Hyde, which is a classic. It's written, I think, in 98 or 97, around that time. It's really old, but it's still valid. It's really about what is this economy of gifts, and that keeps circling, connected to energies, to people, communities, all this thing. I mean, it's a must read for anyone that is a little bit interested in at least this giving economy, is to say. And the other one is The Infinite Machine. It just came out, I think, last year by Camilla Russo. It really talks about like the origin story about Ethereum and why it was created in the first place. And I think with all this hype around gas fees and I don't know what, it's nice to know why it was created in the first place and what was the vision of it. So I would definitely recommend that book too.
Brill. Tell us a little bit about you.
About me? Oh, yeah. There's a lot to tell, but like everyone has a lot of stories. I come from the Netherlands originally. I live in Barcelona now already for like some time. And I originally come from design, UX, but I've been involved in a lot of different communities, especially cooperatives. I started some schools for my kids, co-working. And I recently hooked up with like Akasha Hub, where I got introduced to this whole universe of decentralization. And yeah, it's basically just connecting values with what I was already doing and what a lot of people are doing. And actually seeing that the tech and the values, they're talking 2 different languages, but the values are exactly the same. So I put it as my mission to connect those. And here I am.
So, thank you. Thanks for the 2 books as well. And Griff Green, could you introduce yourself, please, and give us a clue about a podcast or a book?
Sure. So as for me, I have a master's degree in digital currencies, actually one of the first people in the world to ever get one, and have been in the Ethereum space for a really long time relative to the current days. I was part of a project called the DAO, and that ended up being relatively serious issue for Ethereum. Sorry about that. But also participated in a lot of other groups, the White Hat group, which I'm repping today, surprisingly, and which helped recover some of the issues with the DAO and also the parity multi-sig hack. Also started a project called Giveth, which just launched yesterday, a new donation application, which is really cool. And thank you. Founded DAppNode, was part of the founding team of IDEN3 and Hermes, and also the Commons Stack and the Token Engineering Commons, and probably some other projects too. I'm kind of a serial nonprofit DAOist. As far as what to recommend, man, with the crypto space, I like to stay really current because it's really hard to stay up to date in all these things. And just this last week, there was this MetaFest, which has so many good talks, so much good content. You can pretty much just go through their lineup and find the deep dive into anything that you want. And also because of the context of MetaFest, that most people try to keep a high level. So it's a very, I think it's a very good opportunity for people to take the high level deep dive into all the little aspects. MetaFest, yeah.
Thank you.
The Meta Media YouTube channel.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And Andrew Kline, over to you.
Yes, starting like nobody better to have talking about DAOs than Griff here, the OG with the original DAO. Yeah, so me, I'm Andrew, originally from Minnesota in the US, currently based in Madrid, Spain. I've been here for about 2.5 years now. Professionally, my background was in finance and internal consulting. I worked at Land O'Lakes for a little over 5 years. Left to do a master's program over here in Spain. So it brought me over here, did an MBA and focusing on social entrepreneurship. Launched one ed tech startup just after that program finished, focused on teaching kids how to be safe and responsible on the internet. Super important. And now here with DoinGud for the last year. Here's our 1-year birthday. So crazy how fast
Happy
that time's gone. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I'm pretty guilty recently. I've not been reading. The books hasn't made it into time, but like Griff said, I definitely need to spend any extra time, I guess, keeping up with the news that's going on in the space is just incredible. I'm very into podcasts. Walking the dog, that is like the time that I always am kind of jumping between all the different podcasts. I'll call out A16Zs, always have really interesting topics. The bleeding edge of new trends in tech, and that's always a good listen. So
thank you for that. That's a good one. Okay, let's get started. Nikoline, if I could start with you, could you give us your version, your understanding of purpose-driven organizations? What is it, and what is your experience with it?
Yeah, purpose-driven organizations. It's like sustainable organizations or something like that. It's a very vague concept in itself. I mean, you just really need to define like what is the purpose in the first place. I think any organization is kind of fulfilling a purpose, so that's probably what they do, right? But as it's been described in the media or as a term, it's basically that it's an organization that fulfills a purpose beyond their direct benefit. I mean, that's the marketing around it. Yeah, I think any organization should have a vision that is at least thinking how they can improve the world. I mean, that's what we're here for in the first place. But I think there should be a bit more emphasis as well on how they do that. If you hear like purpose-driven organization, it's always nice to see inside their skeleton and see like how are they actually thinking to reach that purpose, and how do they make decisions within their employees? How are that values treated inside that company or that organization? And then you get to the full story of what is their purpose in the first place. So I love the term, but I always ask the question about like, yeah, but what is your purpose then, and where is it going, and how do you do that? So,
and do you have experiences in some of these, in your view?
Yeah, for me it's really hard not to do anything with. I mean, it's the purpose. It's basically starting own projects that, of course, me as a person, I fulfill that purpose. And yeah, it's basically, I think the biggest challenge of that is like, if you really want to go beyond like your personal and the organization personal benefits, you really need to align on a vision, a bigger vision than what is the group, right? So you have the person, then you have the group, and then you have a bigger vision. And if you really, really align on that bigger visions, a magic can definitely happen, you know, and it has happened. I mean, it's like a romantic ideal, like starting a school, for example, with 200 people to build a better future for your kids is a purpose that goes a little bit beyond your own interest and beyond your own needs. So if you kind of exceed the needs, the personal needs of the people, and put that in benefit of the needs of the group and beyond, then you're building something that connects you on an emotional level a lot better. Or I don't know what to say, more energy comes from that. I don't know how to say that, but you can actually do magic stuff.
in the case of the school, was that done in a way that you said that the how is important?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
And
I mean, that was like basically like, okay, what is our values? What do we want to teach our kids? And then we were like, okay, so if we apply that values to ourselves, how do we need to run the school? And then we was like, okay, so we should adopt a kind of governance system that we agree with, according to the pedagogical system that we wanted to teach our kids. So we came to the sociocracy, for example. Nobody had any idea about what it actually was, just that it aligned completely with our values. It's like, okay, let's try it. Let's just do it. Let's see how that works, because that is what we believe in. So let's learn how to do that. And so as a group, we decided to do that. And that is like a very big learning experience and a personal journey, I think, for almost everyone there. So yeah, it helps.
Given my situation, I find that so extraordinary to not only start a school, but also to do it in a way that is so reflective and conscious and present, the way you've described it. Let me change directions a little bit. Andy, how do you, or how could you describe for us a DAO and how it might be different or distinctive from a purpose-driven organization?
Yeah, so with DAO, I guess breaking it down word by word, DAO being decentralized, meaning that it's intended for the governance to be decentralized, where decision making and how the organization is run is decentralized by the users, the community, the stakeholders that all benefit from what this organization is doing as its purpose. Autonomous being that it can be programmed and that like decisions actually come through a programmable way of making those decisions. So in that sense, that there's quite a big difference between DAOs and purpose-driven organizations, in the sense that purpose-driven organizations definitely don't need to be DAOs, and most aren't. Purpose-driven organizations are, as Nikoline described, have a higher purpose. And when you have driven in the world, in the word, I see that as, if they're staying true to the definition, the purpose should be the main driver on top of profits or traditional mechanisms that organizations are created for in the kind of the old school business model. So in that sense, like, yes, purpose-driven organizations very much can be DAOs, but not all purpose-driven organizations are obviously DAOs, and vice versa. But there is a very nice connection that purpose-driven organizations can have by using the DAO structure. And if incentives are really well aligned with how the DAO is structured, in the sense how it can be programmed, with the purpose being the main mechanic or kind of rule for governing how the autonomized function of the DAO is set, and how it's decentralized, kind of spreading that across many users makes it more likely that, if they're aligned, better fulfill that purpose. So there is a good match, but they're definitely obviously not one for one. DAOs can be purpose driven, or I believe DAOs don't have to be purpose driven at all either. Obviously, you think of the Venn diagram. Yes, there's a nice piece in the middle that fits, and I think all of us hope that part in the middle can get bigger and bigger, but it's definitely not.
Doesn't have to.
At that spot now. Yeah, exactly.
And before you arrived at DoinGud, had you any experience or exposure to DAOs?
I hadn't directly to DAOs, but interestingly enough, my background at Land O'Lakes originally. Land O'Lakes is actually one of the largest cooperatives in the world, and like the old school traditional cooperative model, in the sense that it is owned by members. So just a little more context. Land O'Lakes as a cooperative, as an agricultural cooperative, is owned by members being producers in the agricultural system. So for the dairy example, it's owned by dairy producers who sell their milk into this center cooperative, into this organization, Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes has manufacturing plants to turn it into cheese and butter. And then any profits that get made from those sales that the cooperative makes in the center get redistributed back to members or these producers again. So it's a different structure in the sense that it's not owned by, it's not a traditional kind of shareholder Wall Street owned model, but it's owned by the members that are actually benefiting from the purpose of this center organization. So in that sense, you know, there's this kind of learning or thought in the DAO space that there's a lot to learn from this cooperative model, and there's components that fit in trying to align incentives of all the stakeholders, not just shareholders, not just making profits, but rather the members that are benefiting from how the center, the cooperative, the organization is working. So I always thought that was super unique. That attracted me to Land O'Lakes in the first place. And, you know, once connected with DoinGud and kind of started thinking about what we can do here, there's a lot of parallels to what's done in that traditional cooperative structure.
And it beyond the economic structure, the economic entity, what else came out of that structure? It sounds like it was autonomous and it was organized. What else did you find there? Like what attracted you to that?
Yeah, well, I guess in my situation, I this was my job right out of university, so I had the chance to intern there first, and you know, in the moment, like I said, this unique governance kind of was interesting me in the first place. But what kept me there after my internship was just the culture of the company, and you know, definitely wanting to work at a place where the culture fit how you know, fit my values, fit how I want to work. The people are just great people. And I kind of learned over time, I thought that a lot of that might have to do with this model itself, and the culture kind of came a bit from this model that it's not driven by profits or meeting quarterly numbers. It's meant for more long-term benefit of the members. And I did think that had to play into it. And, you know, for me, that ended up me wanting to stay there because the company culture was great as well. So yeah, I think there is a play there.
Yeah, you know, somebody who grew up with a kind of Wall Street understanding of what businesses were. This notion that ownership and governance, as you say, can impact who shows up for work each day, and a certain set of, I think some of our previous panelists said, certain set of values and beliefs and freedoms. Is that, I mean, it makes a difference, right?
No, totally. I think that's most important for many people, and the type of people that I think are the best to work with, those that are driven mostly by like the purpose of a group or purpose of the organization more than anything else. We've seen that here with DoinGud. I mean, I don't want to over push it, but I mean, I think that's the most important thing.
And Griff, if I asked you, how do you go about building and growing a DAO? And this decentralized thing is a little bit of a mystery, given that I'm, for instance, somebody who's worked in large-scale organizations almost my whole life, but not quite. Well, how do you make this happen?
Well, you know, there's DAOs kind of have this two sides to them. It's not the best defined word. Like, there's the structure that you have on a blockchain, that you go to a website and you click some buttons, and then all of a sudden you have a token that you can use to vote on things, and I mean, we could deploy a DAO in 2 minutes and it would mean nothing. It would mean absolutely nothing, because that's just some technology that's sitting there. The real magic is, how do you grow the community? How do you actually create aligned incentives? So, purpose-driven organizations, DAOs, they don't always have like perfectly aligned incentives. Moloch DAO is a very famous DAO, and this is effectively a charity DAO that funds Ethereum development, right? And a bunch of teams that are trying to create value for the Ethereum ecosystem. But the people who are part of that DAO, they just give money to it, and then they decide how to send that money to people. It's effectively a charity, a nonprofit where the donors are sacrificing to create positivity in this world, which is great, of course, but that's not necessarily aligned incentives. So purpose-driven organizations often don't have aligned incentives because people are so driven by the purpose that they forget about their own needs and they forget about their own rewards. I'm really harping on this idea that we need to reward good people for doing good work and create purpose-driven economies that can actually reward people for creating value. And actually, there's a great book, since you mentioned books, by a friend of mine. Her name is Sherman. She wrote a book called Token Economy. She has a whole chapter on purpose-driven tokens. And in fact, I found the link because why not? So I'll just post it in here. Go buy it on Amazon. She's an old friend.
Chill away.
Yeah. But she details it very well there. But in general, when you have an economy, you're not bound by the same rules as a business within an economy. Business models have customers that need to actually pay money for value being rewarded to them. So this business model concept works really well when you're creating value in excludable goods. Because if you can exclude someone from participating and receiving the good, then you can make them pay you to get the good, right? And that's how business models work. But often purpose-driven organizations and purpose-driven DAOs are providing non-excludable value. Like when Moloch DAO funds important projects for the Ethereum space, anyone with Ether can, if the Ether token goes up, receives that value, not just the people in Moloch DAO, right? And maybe everyone in society can receive some of this value, right? If the charity DAO was just funding, taking care of the less fortunate in your local community, well, everyone gets to feel the impact of that, of the value being created. There's probably less crime and there's less guilt when you're walking by and you don't see as many homeless people. Like, everyone wins when we take care of the less fortunate in our society. And so the people providing that value, they don't have a customer. They don't have a business model. But purpose-driven tokens, they can have an economic model. And in an economic model, you can quantify the value that is created using tokens. So now you can have a token that is created when something good happens. Now, of course, mapping that to taking care of the less fortunate in society, that's quite the research project that the Common Stack is working on. But there are a lot of other ways to do that. I mean, if you just look at blockchains, Bitcoin, for instance, Bitcoin creates Bitcoin every 10 minutes to reward the people who are mining on Bitcoin. Now, there's a lot of useless work there with mining, unfortunately, that takes up a lot of electricity. It wasn't the best designed protocol, looking back on it now, just because of the needless waste that's created there. However, it is an open global payment system for all to enjoy. Anyone around the world can create a Bitcoin private key and public key pair and receive funds from anyone else in the world without anybody interfering. This is a public good. And there's also weird blockchains. There's this one called Prime Coin, where every time you find a new prime number, then you receive Prime Coin. Okay, like having a long list of prime numbers isn't a public good that you would expect that matters, but it is a piece of knowledge that now exists, and it's found millions, 30 something million prime numbers. And before its existence, we didn't even know. I don't know if we even knew a million. It was something tiny, of how many prime numbers we knew. So these economic systems can start to create rewarding incentive models where the people who are creating value and have an aligned incentive with the purpose, that are intrinsically motivated and driven to have this purpose, they can also be rewarded for achieving their goals and the value they're creating in ways that were never possible before.
Oh my gosh. And I want to read a quote from Charles Robinson. I just needed one person to nod to feel like I had authority to do that. And Griff, I want you to, if you would, react to it, and then Nikoline, could we go to you for this? I think he wrote this in June last year. There's an ever-growing belief that no one person, nation, corporation, or financial organization should be able to make all the decisions relating to an organization or even the outside world. Hence the emergence of decentralized autonomous organizations that will allow diverse groups to make decisions concerning all of its component parts. Griff, can you talk to us a little bit about the decentralized part? And can we get to that like in a month?
No. So, okay, long story short, this is not a technological issue. Like, we as a society have a lot of challenges coming to grips with this idea that good people should be rewarded for good work, and that things don't change drastically just one day to the next. And actually, this is actually a good thing. We don't want drastic change. Like, this idea of revolution versus evolution, changing this in a month would cause a lot of challenges for a lot of people. So revolutions, you know, I have a talk I gave several years ago where I talk about crypto is not about revolution, it's about evolution, and our roadmaps show that, because it takes time and they're hard. It takes a lot of time. Things go a lot slower than you would think on the bleeding edge. So, and it's for the best, especially because revolution cannot be stopped, right? Revolutions fail all the time, and so if we want to change things from the current bureaucracy, the monopolistic governments that are really, you know, when you think about public goods and purposes that we are all striving for, especially societal purposes, you think about, you know, helping the roads, helping the less fortunate in society, taking care of the environment, having clean water for everybody, having a good economy. These are things that are completely monopolized and controlled by governments. And when they fail, nonprofits step in. Nonprofits are the grassroots opposition to governments, right? They are fulfilling the same values that governments provide in a grassroots way instead of a top-down way. But that top-down approach where they have continuous funding, and then it's very difficult to overcome. And we, especially when our business models don't work to provide those values, we really need to be a little bit more creative. And I'll match your quote with another quote from someone who's been very influential to me, maybe two quotes actually. First from Elinor Ostrom: "There is no reason to believe that bureaucrats and politicians, no matter how well-meaning, are better at solving problems than the people on the spot, who have the strongest incentive to get the solution right." And Elinor really nails it. You know, this approach of one giant organization controlling every public goods vertical is a mistake. It's never going to work. In a dream world, we'd have lots of tiny, purpose-driven organizations that would have aligned incentives to solve the problems. In fact, maybe even compete to solve the same problems that governments are solving, so that they have to get better, and that society has a way to influence who's doing it well, who's doing it poorly. And this is the David Bollier quote that I like to use as well, that the next big thing is a lot of small things. it's just going to take time. And, you know, we're not going to get there in a month, unfortunately, because people don't even believe this is possible. People don't believe that you can be rewarded for doing valuable work for society. So we have other battles to fight. You know, there's this great meme where I have like Common Stack on one side and Giveth on the other side. And Giveth is a donation platform that I'm very excited to integrate with DoinGud, by the way, eventually when we get there. But
and congratulations on it.
The way people like to fund public goods right now is through donations. They like to have this normal, predictable system. This is where we are right now, right? If you want to have lots of small organizations that are trying to create value, you donate to smaller nonprofits, and Giveth is there to make it easy for small nonprofits to raise funds with crypto. They don't have to have they don't even have to have a MetaMask or anything. They just come in, log in with Google, and they can start raising money on Ethereum and XDAI to avoid those gas fees. It's exactly the pattern that people who want to change the world can use right now. Then we have the Common Stack, which is like, let's build purpose-driven economies, microeconomies that can, you know, really change the way that incentives are aligned and create these things. But people aren't ready for this. Like, people don't believe this is happening. I have a talk that I call we have a collective psychosis around public goods. Public goods have value in our minds, but not in our eyes, right? They don't actually, people don't believe in the value when it comes to a spreadsheet. So the nerds of the nerds, we're starting with the token engineering commons, like really like the crypto nerds that actually believe this, they can get it. So, and eventually we take Giveth with real people who are solving real problems on the ground, but in maybe a less than efficient way. And we have the nerds of the nerds that are battle testing the bleeding edge technology, and eventually they come together, and we can get there together. But it's not going to be a month. I'll pass it to Nick.
Yeah, you see the movie happening right there. You know, it's a nice visual, and I think that like there's two things I would like to say. Like if there's like these new tokens coming out because people putting value on things that at this moment they are not included in the economy. That is because they exist and they have incredible value, and every community can decide that for themselves, what has value and not, and then create this economy on top. And the other thing is to come back to the quote that you said as well, Wendy. Like, I don't know, it's like these organizations and the way that we make decisions, I think, are like crucial for how we can move forward on that stuff. Because to come back a little bit to DAOs as well, like basically it's a kind of invitation of experimenting with different governance models, different ways in how can we make decisions as a group to reach that purpose that we want to reach, and how do we get there together without excluding anyone, because most of the governance decision-making process is like super antique. We've been using this same system for like forever, and nobody likes really politics. There's a lot of people that lost their faith in the government because the system is not working. They don't feel included in any of the decisions, and most of the decisions are made based on majority voting, and the ones that are most affected by it is the minority usually. So there is a friction there, and I think DAOs as a technology and a legal entity give this invitation of people to actually experiment in like, how do we want to make decisions together, and how does this affect our organization and the bigger purpose. So that, I think that's a big gap there that we can be just starting to explore that. And it's very exciting to see how a lot of communities are tackling this and what comes out of it. It's just amazing, really.
So I want to pick up on something you said, Nico, about experimentation, because with most with many evolutions in modern society and modern culture, we wait for the model to be proven. And we might find that in terms of a new type of vaccine, for instance, or a technology around a car. We wait for the model to be improved, and we don't ever buy the first thing because we don't want to be dealing with the little tiny failures or the meta failures. But you said something about experimentation a couple times. Is that the only way forward for us on this?
Yeah, we should play and try new stuff. The thing is that, like, it's that you experiment because you know that you can. There is this freedom. Every person and every organization has the freedom to decide the things, how they want to decide things. So you first need to have that consciousness of that freedom that you have, and then you play, you experiment, and the best, you share this with other people. That is very easy now on all this digital realm and the DAO world and everything. You share your experiences and other people do that too. And then you don't need to do everything alone or the first time or anything. I mean, everybody shared their knowledge. It's open sources. Everything is out there. You just need to tap into that and connect. So it's like this little organism of all these little tiny communities that are doing their thing, and they're sharing all this knowledge, and then they can connect and evolve like any organism. That what Griff was talking about is like an evolution, and in the end, it's all biology.
Andy, what's your thought about that and around how we progress? Because it sounds like here. Griff was kindly gave us the label of the bleeding edge in this territory.
Yeah.
There's no model to follow.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, the fun part of it is that there isn't a very clear path. I'll say I completely agree with the thought that it is an evolution and not a revolution. That change, breaking the status quo, takes courage, takes a lot of people to try new things, but it doesn't happen in a snap. It doesn't happen in a month. It doesn't happen in 6 months, maybe not a year, maybe not 3 years. We shall see. And I think it's not only just the macro level in total, but it's also like community. It can be community / organization by organization as well. And what I mean by that is, a community itself or an organization itself often has to progressively decentralize as well. Like a lot of times that piece can't be done. That complete decentralization is really hard to organize and get together and kind of start that way. Often it's a progression. And I think that goes for not only the macro level, but also on the micro level. But in that sense, it's still the evolution. That's the goal. And that is what like really unlocks the major potential of that type of structure, that way of deciding where, yes, the collective aligned incentives and decision making is better than the one person that isn't as close to everything going on necessarily, or what issue should be tackled in which way. So I think that's kind of the combination there at the macro level and the micro level.
So when we were talking earlier tonight about with John Hargrave and Evan Karnapakis, I asked how we can get started, and one of the things they said was buy a little bit of Bitcoin, not a ton, just a little bit, and not so much that you can't afford to lose the whole thing. Plan to lose the whole thing, and then you can go forward confidently. How do we get started in this territory that you're talking about? What's my first step?
I don't know who you're asking it, but I guess to all of us. I think it's not a bad advice that you got, like just get some Bitcoin, because every action that you do actually is a political statement of supporting systems that you believe in. So if you buy Bitcoin, you already are doing something different than what you were doing and supporting another system that you think is the future. So yeah, do that with everything you do. Basically, you support systems that you think is true, and if they don't exist, you just start by, I don't know, maybe include the neighbors of your building to decide together about whatever the elevator needs to be fixed or whatever it is, you know, just little gestures, I guess. On it's just never small enough to have an impact in the long way, and to give like a little bit of hope as well on that. Like there is another book, just because we're in the books, it's called The Tipping Point, that actually shows like how much percentage of the population actually needs to adopt a new thing for it to become like massively adapted. And it's actually a lot smaller than we think. It's like around 10% of the people. So there is new habits that you think like, oh, maybe that takes forever for everybody to get that, for actually change needs to happen. But it's actually a lot smaller than we might think. So that would be a good book to get some hope for that kind of small actions, I guess.
Okay, I can get on board with that. And Griff, what do you think? How else can one get started?
Well, it all depends on what you want. I think always the first thing is to figure out what you want, right? And just be like, oh, I want to be an investor and a trader. Okay, well, you should join those communities. I want to build DAOs. I want to change the world. I want to start purpose-driven organizations and economies. Oh, okay, well, join the Common Stack for sure. Or the Token Engineering Commons, or DoinGud. And those types of organizations. First off, what are you trying to do, right? Like, figure out what you care about. And if it's just making money, that's also cool. That's what you want to do. So you should get started with that, and probably getting into crypto, at least in the long run, will be a great way to go. I really recommend, and how I got started in this was getting into just picking something that I thought was really interesting and dedicating time to make myself useful. You can start buying tokens, and that's a great way to get involved in the trading and the making money game. But if you actually want to get involved with your time, you want to quit your job and go into the crypto evolution, right? Then find a project and become useful. I mean, it's bull market time. Let's just be frank. Like, we need people. We need so many people. I literally hire people basically at least one a week, and just like, and we have different methods of like, people come in and they start working, they just like get paid a little bit, and they just say how many hours they're working. It's low overhead. It's amazing how easy it is in some of these organizations that are built for like, part-time contributors to just add value and leave. And this like kind of gig economy that's becoming available. There's also other projects that are even like straight up targeting that: Gitcoin, Raid Guild, Metaspace, or Meta. There's too many metas. Metagame, and all these really cool groups that are like, oh my god, they have the onboarding infrastructure there. And if you have any skills, and it doesn't have to be technical, like, don't let this idea that, oh, I have to be a coder to play in this game. You don't. Are you kidding? We don't need more coders. We always need a few more
coders.
But we need a ratio, right? We need, like, for every coder, there needs to be a couple other supporting characters that don't know how to code, but they can speak in normal language to people. Like, you know how hard it is to communicate this crazy stuff. So just don't let probably the biggest piece of advice is don't sell yourself short. You have a lot of value to add, and pick the places that you're intrinsically motivated to add value, and just jump in. I don't know, Andrew, you probably have some ideas too.
Yeah, I really like what you were saying there. And I think even like taking a step back, it all starts with like your own personal curiosity towards it as well. Like, often it's hard to join a community, obviously, before just learn about it. There's actually, now that it's some time, like, there are a lot of resources to read up on previous projects and really understand what's going on in DAOs and in this new world. And in that sense, like, that's probably the easiest first step that I think for a lot of people is the most necessary first step is just like feeling comfortable yourself. But then totally agree. The best way to really get involved is joining a community that fits your personal values and what's going to get you excited every day to participate, even if it's part-time, even if it's very part-time. Some it's easy to just join and see what's going on before like you really have to commit. But I'm personally someone that likes to kind of jump in the deep end. I know a lot of others are too. So it's kind of understanding who you are yourself and what the right first step is at the same time. So
that's fair. That's fair. Knowing what matters to you and having a sense of that. And that is a platform for experimentation. Okay. All right. I can get there. We have about 8-9 minutes left. So I'm going to hit you with the closing questions. And Griff, I'm going to start with you if I can. Give us a notable challenge that you see as we progress forward, and then give us a hope that you have for the future.
I think the biggest challenge that I see for advancing the crypto space is honestly just like the friction. There's so much friction around key management. There's so much friction around understanding the technology, and there's so much friction around there's so much expectation that you have to understand the technology. Like, I'm on a video call. I have no idea how this is working. There's a camera. It's pointed at me. There's a microphone, and somehow there's an internet thing. Like, we need to get crypto to that level. And it's going to take time. Right now, we're like saying, hey, make sure you save your 12 words and make sure you download this app and that app. And when you get there, oh my God, you didn't know that you have to do this? And it's so intimidating. And so the biggest challenge for me is lowering our requirements and like needs of users and the masses so that we can make it accessible, right? We need to make this accessible. This technology is so powerful, and yet we make it so hard to touch it. So anyway, I could talk forever.
Yeah, got it. Wait, don't leave us yet. A hope.
Oh, a hope. Oh, well, the hope is it is getting better every day. I mean, there are tools like, I mean, there's the Giveth, for example. You can just like jump on, start raising funds. You don't have to have your keys or any of this. There's just a Taurus wallet, and you have a Google login. And then boom, you're raising money in crypto, and the NFT space is making things really accessible as well. There was a project, sadly they got hacked, but there was a project called Tri-Roll that made it super easy to create your own token in your own social economic system. Like, and these projects, the fact that it's so easy now to start these small tech organizations and like experiment with a new path that is accessible to people is very, very promising and hopeful.
Thank you for that. I'm going to come back to you on that, on a social economic system, starting my own token. Nikoline, a challenge that you see a notable challenge going forward, and your hope or hopes for the future.
Yeah. That's what the hope is easy. The challenge, I think, in these times, there is change happening, and with any change that's happening, there's always a certain resistance against this change. It's a challenge in the sense that I think that before it gets to mass adoption, there is a phase. I mean, there is resistance from other people that are kind of losing their power because organizations like DAOs and people are standing up to take their own power and say like, no, I'm going to put value on this, and we decide it between us, and there's nobody else to decide. So there's always one side that's also losing power on that one, and there will be resistance. It's a very welcome resistance, because if it wasn't there, I would be like super worried, because I would think that we are not changing anything. So we will need to have these challenges and welcome it and embrace it and change because it's in everybody's benefit in the end. And maybe that's the hope that's there as well. Like, it's just if everybody realize really the power that we have and the things that we can decide for ourselves and the systems that we can create. Like, this system that is here now is created at some point as well by someone or by a group of people, and that can be everyone. So it's really, if that consciousness gets there, I don't see any limits going there. So yeah, these are the two things I think for me, at least, going forward.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. And Andy, a challenge and a hope.
So I definitely think the biggest challenge is kind of changing or kind of breaking down the fears people have of a new way of doing things. And, you know, that is why it's such a slow change. And that's continually the biggest challenge. That comes in challenging communicating it so that it's received and not completely disregarded. But just naturally changing human behavior is always the hardest thing. And like, when people are comfortable in how things work, how they're used to working, it's really hard, and it's a big hurdle to change that. So that is the challenge, the biggest challenge. I think it'll continue to be the biggest challenge. But I think my hope, and you know, what I see as being the biggest opportunity to mitigating or kind of helping against that challenge, is just that there's more and more individual brave souls that are starting projects and have like the kind of fight in them to bring people with them. Because I think a lot of times it actually takes that friend that like kind of hits you on the head a couple of times that like, see what's going on here. Like, you might not get taken in by just the kind of passive communication that you're receiving about this. It often takes someone closer to you that is gotten involved to bring you in. So I guess my hope is that kind of spider web is what like can really accelerate change and kind of breaking that challenge of the status quo in a sense, and opening up more people's acceptance of something different than what's comfortable.
What's fascinating about this last part of our discussion is that we're talking about bleeding edge technologies, but the thing we're closing on with the hopes is things like simplify so anybody can get access and not have to think through it 100 times, and individuals confronting their fears of change and of the unknown and the insecurity that comes with that. And even, Nick, I'm thinking about the experimentation and the fear of experimentation because it's an experiment, it could succeed or fail, and there's a lack of clarity about where it goes. And it's so wild, and Andy, you said the fear that when we're talking about such funky technology, really what we end up talking about is knowing yourself, getting comfortable with the fear and the ambiguity, to be able to imagine that this could actually happen, as you said, Griff, to imagine this thing that sounds, when you guys say it, not too good to be true, because it's messy. In its best scenario, it's messy, as Michelle told us earlier, but that's so good that, like, could we really risk doing something about it?
Yeah, it takes a lot of unlearning first. It's not like, oh, I'm going to experiment and I'm going to go wild. I mean, it is like in itself like a personal journey too. You need to unlearn certain habits that maybe are not bringing you to where you want to go. So it's a society change, but it comes with each it's a personal journey too. So as a society, we need to unlearn certain things, but as a person, you need to unlearn certain things too if you want to get there. And for everybody, it's different things. So it's like it's just, I don't know. I stress again that if we share that and we do that together with more people, it's just a lot more powerful and a lot more easy. And there are people that you can find around you that are searching for the same things. So I would just say, like, just connect. Don't let the pandemic stop you from connecting with people, and just keep going, because there's a lot of people wanting to do the same things.
Brilliant. I've had an unbelievably good time tonight. Griff and Nikoline, Andrew, thank you so much for making this so much fun and dynamic and challenging. And to everybody for joining us here tonight. We greatly appreciate, or today, depending upon where you are, you spending your time with us. And we look forward to seeing you the next time. Nikoline, thank you. Griff, thank you
so much, Wendy. You have been
Andrew,
amazing.
Thank you.
Wendy.
I love your questions, and the panels before as well have been awesome. Really, really good. Thank you very much.
They are. They're good. Have a great evening.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.